Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to today's dialogue on green hydrogen ports from policy to practice. My name is Sonja Kotin-Förster. I'm an advisor at GIZ working on bilateral energy partnerships. And jointly with my colleague Rolf Bernd from the International Hydrogen Ramp-Up Program, H2UP at GIZ, we are very happy to guide you through the next 2 exciting hours of today. Green hydrogen and green derivatives, as we all know, are key elements to decarbonize industrial production and diversify energy imports. As Germany's demand for green hydrogen will outweigh the local supply options, Germany will need to import green hydrogen and PTX products. In order to do this, ports will play a crucial role in the global hydrogen and PTX trade. So far, various memorandums of understanding, MOUs, were signed to implement bilateral hydrogen partnerships between different ports. However, today we want to understand a bit better what has happened since the signatures of the MOUs, what are the next steps for the delivery, namely the export and the import of the derivatives, and how can we enable further distribution of hydrogen to the industrial off-takers, the so-called last mile delivery. For this, we are delighted to welcome distinguished speakers from the public and private sector, from Berlin, Hamburg, Bremen, and Wilhelmshaven, as well as from Uruguay, Morocco, Norway, and Brazil. And with this, I hand over to my colleague Rolf.
Thank you, Sonia. So I'm very happy to join you all. So a very warm welcome also from my side. My name is Rolf Bernd, and together with Sonia Kotin-Förster, we will happily guide you through today's event. It's great to see so many people online. So great to see that actually the theme is interesting for so many people. A couple of housekeeping issues before we start. So mics are muted. We're happy to collect your questions. Please post them online, ideally also with your name and organization, and we'll definitely call them up. We are trying to make this as interactive as possible. So we will take questions after we will have 4 rounds of technical presentations. We're happy to take questions after each round to make sure that really these are your questions, this is your session. And then afterwards, we will have a panel discussion with all speakers at the very end. We will record the session. I mean, this is standard practice today. So if you don't mind being recorded, happy to stay on. Otherwise, you'll probably have to jump off, but you're probably used to that anyway. With that, enough housekeeping. Let me hand over to our keynote speaker. I would like to introduce our Mr. Dr. Christian Storst, the head of division from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. The German Ministry for Climate Action is sponsoring this event. It's sponsoring this program, but it is actually one of the most important sponsors for climate change in all of Germany. The BMWK also sponsors the H2 Global that I've been asked about globally in many cases. It sponsors also many other funding programs really to support the hydrogen ramp up. So it's like our key champion for our climate change in Germany. With that, Dr. Christian Storst, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sonja. Thank you, Rolf. And good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, to this conference. Today is a day full of energy, and today's event definitely shows that Germany is open to the world, not only harbor-wise, but also for hydrogen. So I'm very glad that we have 8 distinguished speakers today with us in this webinar, and big thank you to more than 80 participants, or more than 100 even right now, this very moment that we have today, for sharing your ideas, for sharing your insights, and for your interest in setting up the scene for Germany's hydrogen ramp up. In fact, Germany is aiming to become climate neutral by 2045, as you all know. And wherever direct electrification is not possible in these hard-to-abate sectors, green hydrogen and power-to-X are central elements for our energy transition. According to the current Climate Action Status Report and the National Hydrogen Strategy, Germany's domestic hydrogen consumption amounts actually to roughly 55 terawatt hours and is supposed to grow, to double almost by 2030. So we forecast a hydrogen demand of about 90 to 130 terawatt hours for the year 2030. And most of this demand is needed by imports. So as we will definitely not be able to produce all the hydrogen necessary within Germany or even within neighboring countries, there's a growing demand also for harbor infrastructure. We forecast the import demand and the general share of imports to be around 70% by 2030. Germany will be open, therefore, for imports for the world, and we definitely almost 5 years from now have been working on this. We have energy partnerships and hydrogen partnerships with about 30 countries worldwide, and we currently work on this further in order to get also partners for our showcase program H2 Global, which I'm in charge of. Simplistically, the low generation costs for solar and wind energy and available land for implementing gigawatt projects will be needed in other parts of the world, and we stand ready not only to export the necessary technology, but also to help set the framework, legal framework, the practical framework. And we have GIZ, luckily with us, to also help consult the relevant experts on a worldwide scale. So please feel free to take advantage of these offers. As I said, Germany has already started and continues to establish economic partnerships with countries in which hydrogen can be produced efficiently and aims to systematically develop green hydrogen projects and trade relations with partner countries. And we've discussed a lot of this throughout the BETD, the flagship event that has just taken place here in Berlin. Some of you I've already seen in this event, and all those who didn't make it, please take advantage of the next year's event. BETD is really a flagship event also for hydrogen ramp-up. Meanwhile, we progress with the National Hydrogen Strategy review in June 2020. As most of you surely are aware, the first strategy has been adopted, and currently it's under revision. Germany's National Hydrogen Strategy supports the development of markets for the production and the use of hydrogen through 38 measures, and my ministry has initiated a number of initiatives in this regard already. In the upcoming revision, we believe that the task ahead is a global one. International exchange and partnerships are of great importance for the creation of global markets. So we definitely aim at establishing further energy partnerships and deepening the political dialogue, and also in further cooperation with the private sector. The International Hydrogen Ramp-Up Program, so-called H2UP program, which the Federal Ministry finances and which is implemented by GIZ, complements this political dialogue just mentioned through its bottom-up approach. H2UP works with companies on the identification and preparation of projects in the early stage of project development, and it also brings together financial actors. Germany provides already by now various targeted support programs and funding instruments to support the scale-up of international green hydrogen projects at different stages, such as H2 Global, the PTX Development Fund, and the funding guideline for hydrogen. So to conclude, Germany is aware that infrastructure, and especially overseas ports, will play a crucial role in the global trade and transport of hydrogen and PTX products. Ports are the bridges between those countries producing and exporting green hydrogen and those importing and consuming. Ports are the key element in the H2 and Power-to-X value chain. They are the focal points to assemble and process the export, respectively to receive and process for distribution. Supporting global trade is necessary for Germany to achieve its climate goals. Therefore, Germany is approaching these challenges with different measures and supporting mechanisms. And we look forward for today's webinar to exchange ideas on how we could do better, which programs we should defend in the upcoming budgetary negotiations, and where we might learn from others, from other countries such as the US and Canada, just working on their support schemes. But I think Europe and Germany especially have a lot to bring forward also in this respect. And please take advantage of these offers, take advantage of GIZ. And now I would like to hand over to my colleagues to moderate us through this seminar. I wish all of you a very successful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Storost, for setting the stage of today's event. Your ministry has indeed been very busy in terms of developing a global hydrogen market. And let's dive into the discussion. We have all seen the news articles last year about MOUs that were signed for the import, respectively the export of green hydrogen. And in order to shed some light of how these MOUs are being implemented, we will hear from an importer, namely the Hamburg Port Authority, as well as from an exporter, the National Port Administration in Uruguay. Dear participants online, please post your questions in the chat. We will try to address them after the presentations. And now let's hand over to our second speaker of today. She is currently serving as an environmental strategist for the Hamburg Port Authority since 2018. Linda Harstedt, and she's been involved in several port infrastructure projects, such as building a hydrogen economy in the port of Hamburg, and is presently leading efforts to establish a green shipping corridor between Canada and Hamburg. Linda, thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sonja. Yeah, as mentioned, today I brought the topic of hydrogen MOUs and its implementation, and from an importer perspective, or from a Hamburg, or from a port authority perspective. Just one question. The presentation will be shared, right? Because I cannot see it.
Yes, no problem. Just give us a second. The technical team will share the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe we can just directly start with the next slide. So in order to find the right way when it comes to hydrogen MOUs, we had to understand our own role in the hydrogen economy. So as Hamburg Port Authority, since we are the largest German seaport, our main duties are maintaining the infrastructure in the port, so land side, the streets, the railways, as well as water side. We are responsible for safe navigation in the port, as well as for the land property. So we are landowner, and we are renting out our land to private companies. So when it comes to the hydrogen economy, we do not operate own terminals in the port, and we do not carry or sell any goods. So our role is actually more an enabler role. So we are using our land resources for brownfield and greenfield projects. So greenfield projects are more on a long-term basis. We are focusing currently on brownfield projects. So using existing infrastructure, companies, processes in the port to implement the hydrogen economy in Hamburg. So based on this situation in our port and in Hamburg, we were thinking, how can we use port corporations to support the hydrogen economy in our ports? So today I brought the example of our cooperation with the Port of Halifax. The next slide, please. So that one, this cooperation is actually based on the Canadian-German Hydrogen Alliance, which was set up previous year. So just 1 month later, the representative of the Port of Halifax and the Port of Hamburg, they signed an own MOU. So the Port of Halifax is just one port we are starting with. So, but we are in general open to any ports. But in this case, for us, it is an advantage to have our national governments in the back and have them, their commitment as fundament for our work. So the MOUs were signed. How did we actually come to action? How can we implement the MOUs? So we decided to set a goal to set a green shipping corridor by 2025. On the next slide, please. So the time frame of 2025 is already set by the Hydrogen Alliance of Canada and Germany. So we as ports, we decided to focus on the value chain approach. For us, it is important to not see this industry as an isolated industry, but to focus on the whole value chain. So we thought about how can we as port have an influence and support. So therefore, we set three subtopics. So on the one hand, it will be the transport of hydrogen or derivatives from Halifax to Hamburg. Next to this, the port infrastructure for bunkering. For us, it is important in the value chain approach to ensure that actually the green goods are still green when they are in Hamburg. So therefore, we need to ensure that the hydrogen or derivatives are transported green to Germany and to supply the appropriate infrastructure for this. A third point, we want to increase or create the local awareness in our cities and surroundings. So how can we, or together with the Port of Halifax, we had a workshop, how can we actually come into action to implement these goals? So when it comes to the transport of hydrogen, we decided to look into the feasibility on board. So to look into the technical, the operational, and the economic feasibility. So we want to get an insight, how do future ships will look like? What are their sizes? Are they allowed to come into our port? Where can they go in our ports? How will be the bunker habits in the future, for example? What kind of infrastructure we need to provide? This is something we want to get an insight. When it comes to concrete bunker infrastructure in the ports, we set a goal to conduct a real risk analysis or for one berth in our ports. And when it comes to locals, we want to take the locals with us. We want to increase our communication and be open and transparent about our activities in the port. So during this process, we identified already a key stakeholders we need for our port cooperation, and these are the shipping companies, since they are the transporters of hydrogen. So they are really the key stakeholders we need to get on board. Next to these, or which are more critical stakeholders, are the local authorities. So these might be the fire brigade, the water police, local environmental authorities. They give, or in the future, they will give the permission for these activities in the ports. And it's important to get them from the beginning on board in order that they have the chance to create own expertise, own knowledge about the topic, and to be ready for give permission. Yeah, next slide, please. So during the last month, what we learned so far in this project together with the Port of Halifax is that we always will go for the value chain approach, to look at the whole value chain and to take every stakeholder needed with us to be on the same page. And just to ensure a green life cycle, so that the green product, which is green from exporting, is still green when we get it in Germany and the end user in the end. So far, when it comes to stakeholders, for us, the shipping companies are the essential stakeholders. We are currently in the process of contacting different shipping companies to get an insight about their decarbonization strategies and future fuels, the way how to implement this, and to start cooperating with them. And the early identification and the engagement of the critical stakeholders. These are mainly the local permitting authorities, to give them the chance to prepare, also to be ready to give permission. So this is so far what we are doing together with the Port of Halifax and the current status. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing with us how I really liked the term that you used, enabler, how you enable the hydrogen economy through the entire value chain. That's very impressive. Now I would like to hear the perspective of an exporter before we start with a few questions. So dear participants, feel free to post your questions in the chat. And now I would like to hand over to our third speaker, Mr. Andres Nito. He's a civil engineer specialist in transport, and he's the National Port System Manager of the National Port Administration of Uruguay and Professor of Transport Engineering and Ports at the University of Montevideo. Good morning, Andres. Thank you so much for joining. Can you tell us a little bit about MOUs that you have signed? Perhaps what have been some of the challenges in implementing the MOUs? So what happens after signature to bring it to practice? The floor is yours. We can't hear you yet, so please unmute yourself.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, wonderful. Now we can hear you. The floor is yours.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, Andres. We can hear you. Okay, you know what? While
Hello?
we sort out the technical problems, can you hear us now?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, you know what? Let's sort out the technical problems in the background. No
Hello?
problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Let's I saw that there has been a question in the chat to Linda. Perhaps we can address this first, if it's okay for you, Linda. There was the question, who will deliver the green hydrogen? Are there any agreements that are signed with the hydrogen producers or suppliers?
Yeah. Who will deliver it? So I would say it's not limited just to one company.
Hello, Eva. Can you hear me?
So as far our status is that also in Canada, they're still busy with building renewable or plans for the production of renewable energy. So they also at the beginning of setting up the whole, actually also the whole value chain from the exporter's point of view. So they are now starting building windmills to produce the green energy or the green energy to produce the hydrogen and then starting exporting it. So it's not limited to one company. So there will be several companies in the future who will sell the energy to European countries or to Germany. So one company which is involved in our project is the company of Everwind. They are strongly or quite close located to the Port of Halifax, and they are strongly working together with the Port of Halifax. So just to give one name of example, it will be Everwind, one of them, but there will be several more.
Linda, thank you for that. It helps us greatly to understand that the challenge indeed in hydrogen is the complexity of the chain and connecting producers. Here the port has to the export, and here the port has an important role to play. Let me continue. So, well, we will try to resolve the technical issues with Mr. Nieto, and perhaps to take him back, bring him back in later. For the moment, let us continue. And since we're discussing really how to connect producers and exporters, let me take the next stage and go to the next block and the next panel of the ports themselves. And here the question is, what do the ports need to do? How do they need to organize themselves really to make sure that they are able to accept, process, and then transport the hydrogen into ships? And with that, we have two panelists really. One is the receiving port view and one is the sending port view. Let me start off with Bremerhaven. Everybody knows Hamburg, but Bremerhaven, Germany has more ports. And Bremerhaven is trying to compete also with a far larger Hamburg. And for this purpose, I'd like to introduce Mr. or Dr. Lars Stemmler from Bremen. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you. You look looks like Bremen is still fairly cold because you're still really warmly dressed. I hope that Bremen will warm up eventually. We're really happy to have you because you've got really great experience in maritime logistics. You have a PhD actually in port policy, so you really know the technical details of actually how to bring ports together. So we're very happy you've joined us. So please tell us more of how Bremen wants to create its port and actually provide competition to not just Hamburg, but Rotterdam as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. I would like GSZ to share my presentation, please, and maybe you go straight to the second slide. Having said that, also a warm welcome from my side. I would like to take you to Bremen and Bremerhaven, two ports, one city, basically. And well, I would like to expand the topic a little bit and really addressing the issue as the headline of this session says, creating hubs, basically. Well, on the next slide, first clear advice from our side, be clear about what you want to achieve and by when, basically. And when I mean what you want to achieve, I really mean the decarbonization targets either set by multilateral bodies like the IMO, for example, or the federal targets, or even the targets set by your own community, given the fact that the ports are under the auspices of the federal states in Germany. It is here the free Hanseatic city of Bremen. And with this layered approach, so focusing on the port management, on the wider port area, which is actually the port itself, including the terminals and all the auxiliary services, as well as a wider port community or port industry, including all the maritime logistics providers and the clients. You've got a multitude of stakeholders to address. And our experience is here simply talk. What to talk about? On the next slide, the emphasis is really that ports are not only there to import or export any form of energy, be it green hydrogen or be it PTX or whatever. We also have to take into account the production of, in particular, electrical energy by means of solar or wind, and the usage of this energy in the port itself. So we've got these functional dimensions multiplied by the number of stakeholders, as per the previous slide, for example. And you've got, you judge the scale of the problem. I wouldn't say complex, I would rather say complicated. The feedback loops to make it complex are presented on the next slide, because Bremen, as comparable to Hamburg, is a landlord port. So the land in blue, and including the harbor basins and all related marine infrastructures like locks, is owned and operated by the federal state, i.e. by Bremen Ports. And on top, all the logistical installations here in red are owned and operated by the terminal operators, which work under land lease or concession agreements. And that's pretty easy to grasp, but the nitty-gritty comes in when you consider the grid, for example, which you need to integrate all the three functions I just outlined, i.e. production of electrical energy in the port, consumption, as well as facilitating any form of import or export. So electrical grid, that's one side, pipelines are the other. And here you've got various interests to address. In particular, also the local utility which might operate the grid, So it brings in also kind of public stakeholders, a stakeholder which up to today's times were not that used to the maritime world, was not exposed to the maritime world as a port operator was. So quite a number of questions to address. From our side, the most challenging at the moment in terms of local usage of energy is shown on the next slide. We did an analysis of the energy flows, and it's actually the diesel consumption we have. It's not so much about importing hydrogen. That would be a next step. But first, we wanted to be clear about what is the potential of energy collaborations, basically, in our port itself. So it was the diesel bit, and step by step, our tenants, i.e. the terminal operators, starting to electrify, and this gives really a great potential, gives great opportunities to integrate all three functions. And yeah, what the final lessons really to lift the role, Linda pointed out, should be an enabler, and I completely agree to that. Illustrated on the next slide. So we have got the role to focus really on the needs of the port, on our tenants, say smart grid operation in terms of electrical energy, focusing on the need to facilitate the use of import-export, and the overlapping interests become clear because of the energy. It's not fossil fuels, which have completely different properties. But here we talk about the options also to decentralize energy production and energy usage, of course, in terms of electrical generators, electrical consumption. And this was great opportunities. And coming back to my initiating claim, it's talk. As an enabler, we have to integrate our stakeholders. It's no longer the old business model of hitting the public procurement sites on the internet and saying we've got an area here which is open for land lease, and then the offers come in. No, it's far more than that. In terms of attracting tenants of the energy business, you have to be clear about your own options, the local business models, on top of those business models that shall be facilitated by attracting any tenants of the industry to your own port. So conclusion here is far more than in the past. We have to take into account the requirements of the stakeholders and try to balance the different interests here as an active enabler, as an active port authority. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lars. I mean, this is, I think, an honest thing. Is very happy that you're reminding us that there's just a huge number of different types of logistics to be resolved, and different types of fuels and electricity and heat, and everything needs to combine, which makes it actually a much more complex exercise than purely linking to hydrogen. So well done. And keeping us on the ground actually is much more complex than perhaps we just think. That was the receiving side. So let me now introduce the next speaker, the sending side. And here we have, I'm very proud that we have somebody representing Morocco to join us. This is Nohela Nabil from the IRISEN, the Institut, or l'Institut de Recherche en Énergie Solaire et Énergie Nouvelle, which, or translate, means Institute for Research on Solar Energy and New Energy Sources. I'm very pleased that you're joining us today. Morocco has already set up its own green hydrogen hub. So please, welcome. And before I forget, also still a very happy Eid Mubarak now that we finished out the fasting season.
Thank you so much, Rolf, for the introduction, and I'm happy to be with you today. I'm Nohela Nabil from IRISEN, the Research Institute for Solar Energy and New Energies. I think, may I share my presentation? Or, okay. I can share it if it's...
I think either way, I think we're trying to make it centrally, but I'm not sure if you shared. If you didn't, then go ahead, share it your side. Okay.
Perfect.
You
You can
will just
see.
need to, yes, but can you please switch to total screen view?
Okay, perfect. So today I will just give you a brief insights about green hydrogen in Morocco, and also an overview about infrastructures, port infrastructures here in Morocco. So Morocco is widely qualified to play an important role in the green hydrogen market all over the world, and furthermore, it has been identified by many international studies as a quick candidate to host this Power to X project, and it was called the Hyped One. Given its high potential in terms of renewable energy that can reach 26 gigawatt in terms of wind and solar technical capacity. We have also a strong political support from our Majesty the King Hassan Mohammed VI. Recently, he has launched his directives of preparing hydrogen Moroccan offer. Also, we have a successful deployment of renewable energy plants. The example of Noor Ouarzazate, which is a big power plant, which explains the expertise and also the qualified of the human capital. Also, the growing of R&D infrastructures in all over all the country. The name of the Green Energy Park, Green and Smarter Building Park. They are a dedicated R&D platforms for testing, training, and also demonstrations in the field of new energies. We have also a local consumption or a local market for green hydrogen, which is the industry applications as the example of OCP, which is the big player of fertilizer industry. So they are a big consumer of ammonia. Ammonia is one of the derivatives of green hydrogen. We have also a strong proximity to Europe and also a very strong connectivity with the MENA region, Europe, and also Asia and Africa through maritime and also through pipes. So 3 important studies was conducted since 2018 in hydrogen power to X in Morocco. The first one was dedicated to market and technologies. The second one was dedicated to Morocco potential and opportunities in terms of power to X and also green hydrogen market. The last one that was published in 2021 is the National Green Hydrogen Strategy. That was conducted by the Cabinet Frontier Economics. We have created also 2 entities, the National Hydrogen Commission, with the mission of setting up the legal framework of this green hydrogen economy, and the green hydrogen cluster that gather all the private stakeholders that are present in the whole value chain of green hydrogen. Morocco also signed an agreement with Germany in June 2020 to develop a regional market on Power to X, and also recently in 2022, Morocco signed an MOU with the European Union to establish a green partnership that also cover the energy sector. As I mentioned before, we had our Majesty Hassan Mohammed VI, the King Mohammed VI, has given his instructions for the development of a Moroccan offer that's covered the entire value chain of hydrogen on last November 2020, so in Rabat. And now we have many stakeholders that are working on this offer that will gather many many areas, infrastructures, policies, and technologies, and also training. This committee is led by the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. So the roadmap mainly of green hydrogen in Morocco gives priority to export and also to use of hydrogen as a feedstock for the fertilizer industry. And then other priorities will come after for mobility and also for maritime and aviation transport. For the action plan, it focuses on three aspects or on three pillars: technologies, demand, market, investment, and supply. And two main or principal action plans are the setting up of an industrial cluster and develop related infrastructure master plan. And the second one is to create the conditions for exporting power to export products from Morocco. This came here came the importance of port to be developed and also to be prepared for as a main principal infrastructure in Morocco. So for the green hydrogen cluster that gather all the private sector or private companies in Morocco that are present in the whole value chain, and they are interested to develop this economy. The main object is to promote the hydrogen sector, support and through support and coordination of innovative collaborative projects. And we have representatives from ministries and also from other companies like Mazen, AME, Siemens, also NG, HDF, Aquapower, Aqua Group, and also T5 Group, and other universities and Moroccan research centers. The president of this green hydrogen cluster is Mr. Mohamed Yahya Znibar, and the cluster is divided into 6 committees. The committee that is dedicated to research, development, and innovation. The other one is dedicated to renewable energy industry, and the third one is dedicated to chemical industry, and one other committee dedicated to projects that will be installed here in Morocco, and the fifth committee is dedicated to international partnership, and the last one is dedicated to energy transport, and which is led by ONIM, which is the Office National for Hydrocarbons and Mines by Mrs. Amina Belkhadr. The country's vision is to become a regional hub for green molecules trading. Morocco's ambition is becoming, as I said, key player in the export, thanks to his geographic position. So ports of the kingdom are key links in the chains, trade logistics, and constitute a lever important to develop economic and social development of the country. These ports are covering the whole coastline of Morocco. As I will show you after here the.
Nohela,
Yes.
can I give you a 60-second warning?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I will quick speed up. So the authorities that are present here in the ecosystem of ports, we have the Ministry of Equipment and Water, which is responsible for port strategies, the Moroccan Agency for Port and TMSA, which is responsible for regulations and policy port, and Marsa Maroc, which is a private company, Moroccan private company, which is responsible for operation of terminals. As are seen here in my map, the global port current offers is around theoretical capacity of 200 million tons, and it must be extended to support or to overcome the need of shipping requirements. And the strategy of hubs was settled up in order in order to develop regions and all over Morocco. So several key factors promise strong growth in demand port. The national and sectorial policies that are being implemented intended to contribute to the economic and social development of the country, valuing the proximity to Europe, which offers potential for business, and also the development of hub concept. Here we see that we have 6 hubs, one in the region of in the north, which is mainly led by the Nador port, and the pole, also the hub of northwest, which is led by Tanger Med, and the other hubs in the region of Kenitra, Casablanca, and also in Abd al-Dakhla. And in the south, we have 3 main ports that are already we have an extension for the port of Dakhla, which is located in the south port, south hub. This port will be dedicated, the last line. This port will be dedicated mainly to trading and also exports, since we have a huge potential in terms of renewable wind and solar there. Thank you. So this is just an...
Wait, sorry, Nahila, we're gonna have to skip it now.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Thank you for your attention.
So thank you. So honestly, we would. I can understand why you probably have so many other slides. You have a lot to talk about, and we would probably have to invite you for a separate session just to talk about Morocco alone. It's just we have too many other speakers today. But I'm very happy to see how much Morocco is really progressing and really having so many plans for hubs. I have a question actually, so to both you, Nohela, and to Lars. And I think just to get some of the basics back is when it comes to hydrogen, one of the key issues that perennial discussion is always, what are you going to be exporting, or what are you going to be importing for that matter? Are you looking at liquid hydrogen? Is it ammonia? Is it methanol? Or do you want to have hydrogen pulver? So in powder form, sorry. So let me start with Nohela. What's your preferred form?
Yeah, thank you. I think first of all, it depends on the off-taker. It depends on the end user, if it will be using green ammonia or green methanol or green steel. So there are a wide market of green hydrogen, and the transport options is mainly depending on the end user and which will be the main or the relevant option for transport. Two infrastructures here are in front of us: pipes or maritime or shipping the fuel. So
okay, that means you're at the moment you're hedging all your bets. You're doing everything. Okay, fair enough. So Lars, what is Bremerhaven then doing?
I completely agree with Noelia. So we are currently looking into various options. We've got a large steel plant in the port of Bremen, which is supposed to be connected to a pipeline. But we as a port operator, we would like to provide a backbone. So most probably we talk about hydrogen in a pressurized form, pure and pressurized. We do look into methanol to supply existing local, at the moment, fossil fuel driven distribution networks, as well as our local bunkering supplies. But what we are not keen on is ammonia, basically. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay, so we could probably continue this discussion for an hour. I can tell you we've had so many questions from participants in that regard. Safety, infrastructure, who buys, who sells. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to hand over to Sonia. So just because we still have another 4, even 5 speakers to follow. Otherwise, we will just run out of time. So thank you, Lohela. So Chok Shukran, and thank you, Lars.
Yeah,
and we'll talk to you in the panel.
Thank you, Rolf. Thank you, dear speakers. And we will try to address the questions from the audience in the panel discussion later on. But as Rolf said, let's move on to the next part of this webinar. Let's talk money. Making ports hydrogen ready, we all know, requires significant funds. And to gain some insights into key aspects for investments into hydrogen port terminals from the private sector, we are very pleased to welcome Hartmut Bayer from HPC, Hamburg Port Consulting, as our speaker today. He's an industrial engineer with 3 decades of experience in port consulting, and he did not only work in Europe, but also in Asia and Africa, and will therefore share all his experience with us in today's webinar. He is the authorized representative of HPC Hamburg Port Consulting and part even of the co-funding management team. And he contributes to strategy, concepts, and funding consulting for waterway transport and intermodal logistics systems. Hartmut, the floor is yours.
Sonia, thank you very much for this kind introduction. Let me just look to give you a chance to see my presentation. I hope you can see it now. So
yes,
yeah,
we can.
You can. Very good. Fantastic. So thanks for inviting me to this fantastic and great session. I'm very pleased about it. And as you introduce myself, I have the task to speak about financing, to speak about money. It will be a very brief, a brief overview about this subject, because 7 minutes is not that much to talk about it in details. Very briefly, HPC Hamburg Port Consulting, we are supporting our clients in different areas, investing, management, optimization of the facilities and operational procedures. We concentrate on the ports, but also on terminals and the hinterland transport infrastructure. And what you can see is some key characteristics. We have been working in the industry for more than 46 years, different countries, a lot of ports, and we are very much heading forward for this issue of sustainability, which means automatization, optimization of the operations on the terminal, application of hydrogen, e-mobility, and and that's our focus on the one hand side, and the second side is again co-funding, identifying co-funding programs for our clients. So that was a short introduction. We're talking about financing of hydrogen terminals, but the question is, what kind of hydrogen terminal are we talking about? You know that this hydrogen exists in different forms, compressed gaseous or liquefied, but also as derivatives, ammonia, methanol, and LOHC. And that's, of course, for the investor, a very important question. What kind of, how should the terminal look like? Yeah, where does my money go into? What kind of technology? And we made a very quick internet research here on the most common information about hydrogen terminal plans. And what you can see, which is not representative, what you can see, we have a number of projects in Europe. We also have some in Namibia, Luderitz, and also a pilot project in Australia, Japan, where they have established the first liquefied hydrogen terminal. It's a pilot one, very interesting. But what I want to say with this sheet is that most of the projects at the moment talking hydrogen are focusing on ammonia, importing of ammonia, exporting ammonia from countries with a great climate situation and importing it to Europe, and then as ammonia. And the good thing is, of course, that the industry know how to handle this kind of category of product, because this is a very common commodity which is used for fertilizer plants and the chemical industry. So ammonia seems to be the way forward, but we can discuss it, of course, very openly. Where does the money come from? We have public sources and we have private sources, of course. The public sources are listed here, 3 major groups. The one is the national funds, I mean, we all know that actually every nation, every government is looking for this hydrogen technology, wants to become to work on a sustainable energy supply strategy, and each and every nation has a strategy. I took the freedom to look in particular for the countries of my the other speakers. So there's money available, and there's a strong interest from the government. When we have a look to the European Commission, of course, they also have a strategy, hydrogen strategy. They want to replace fossil fuels. They have their CO2 emission goals for 2030, 2050. And there are some programs to support member states in that case to invest in hydrogen, to develop, to do research and development, like this IPCEI program, important projects of common European interest is the full phrase. So here's money available. A lot of money has been spent already. Global Gateway is another very interesting program for international partners, because this is a kind of, it's a program that's focusing on the support of international partner countries. It's a kind of counterbalance to the Chinese Silk Road Initiative, and it has a strong focus on sustainable energy production and also developing the transport hubs. That might be quite interesting for international partners. And when we go to the right-hand side, we have international development institutions like World Bank, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank. They have a lot of programs to support international partner countries, mainly in terms of technical assistance. They also are prepared to hand over some loans, but we're not talking about grants or some real co-funding. When we have a look to the private companies, it's a different perspective and also a different motivation. The motivation is profitability and profitability and profitability. Of course, this is how it works. They look for terminal investments where they can earn some money, which is okay. Or they might also look for some projects where they can, which have an impact on their corporate identity towards the public. So we have the private maritime companies as a group of potential investors. There are some terminal investors out there which are very experienced in investing in terminals. I took the freedom to mention APM Capital. They are very good in container terminals. They might be also interested in other kind of terminals. And of course, also shipping lines might be interested. You know that the shipping industry have made a fantastic profit the previous 2 years, and they might be also interested to invest in terminals, maybe even in ammonia or hydrogen terminals. Apart from the maritime companies, we have non-maritime companies, which are companies, they collect a hell of money and they have to invest the money, like pension funds, insurance companies. They have to invest it and they are looking for good opportunities, and very often they are, let's say, encouraged by the customers, the clients, to look for sustainable infrastructure projects, and that might be another option to get a project or to get a hydrogen terminal co-financed. When we take a private or business perspective, what is necessary if we look for investors, or what are their expectations? Of course, they want to see an attractive business case when they do an investment. They want to understand, do I get my money back? They are very much interested in risk sharing and guarantees, of course. Very often they are interested to have a combined financing of terminals, of port infrastructure by even the public side. Ease of doing business is a common phrase, of course. Whenever you invest in a country, you would love to have a stable political and social environment, so that you can have the expectation that your investment will pay off at the end of the day. And timing, of course, is a matter. When does it start? What is the exact schedule of this project? And again, what about my investment? Can I get it back in a reasonable time? And here are some requirements towards national government. or international institutions. I mean, the money side is one issue. The other one is to prepare a framework to prepare the ground for the investors. And when it comes to the governments, there is an expectation for realistic, easy policy regulations, which make it easy to go into that new technology, to invest. Fast application process. This is something from Germany. We are very slow in that respect, but that is of course interesting for investors to be interested in that kind of project. Stable supply environment. That is of course important to understand where we have a steady flow of hydrogen or derivatives. We have talked about the memorandum of understandings, and there are a lot out there. A lot is underway at the moment. And of course, that's a great prerequisite to, again, prepare the ground for investments in more terminals. Easy and extensive co-funding, yes, of course, as the technology in some respect is still new, as there is a lot of requirements to build the infrastructure in the port or even the production infrastructure. Co-funding from state programs is very much required actually so that something is happening. And finally, standards, international standards are necessary and important. International Standard Organization have worked on this. Of course, there is a standard on hydrogen technology, and I'm convinced they are working on that. And much more needs to be clarified to make sure that we have from a technical side, an easy flow of hydrogen or derivatives from the exporter to the importer countries. So finally, I hope I still in the 7 minutes, if you take the 3 sentences with you, the question is, what is the final commodity? How do we transport hydrogen in the future? Will it be ammonia? Maybe yes, because that seems to be easy when it comes to technical requirements, and maybe some other forms or derivatives might come up for other purposes. A public fund is available to invest or to prepare the ground to build or to invest in terminals. So you look around and try to identify the interested programs or governments. And private funds, yes, they will step into the business. They have stepped already into the business. For example, when it comes to an ammonia terminal here in Hamburg, they've made a big step forward, and they will become more and more active when the commercial viability will increase in the future. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hartmut. This has been a very great overview of how we should look at the topic of finance. And I think it was especially interesting also for our participants to hear about public funds, but also private funds. And you mentioned already some of the obligations that obviously the public sector has, regulations, managing cooperation, topic of co-financing. But somehow when you read about the topic or when you speak to stakeholders, we often still feel that there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? You say private money comes in as soon as there is a commercially viable business case. But of course, we need the public sector to help to develop these business cases. Can you share a little bit more light on where you would see public funds really going to? You mentioned port infrastructure, but which parts of it and which other parts will then need to be privately financed?
Yeah, the government is responsible for the infrastructure, transport infrastructure. This is something we know from Europe. They have to prepare the ground and to prepare the, let's say, the bed where private investors can settle. And when I talk about infrastructure, I mean, we have to make a distinction between ports and terminals. Ports is something Linda is taking care of. You know, they are preparing everything to make it happen that private terminal operator can establish and can start business. Infrastructure, to my understanding, is also to co-fund also the production of green hydrogen, or let's say green energy, which is a requirement for green hydrogen, and pipelines and everything. I mean, this is something, to my understanding, which is required. to stimulate private investors with additional money and also with additional know-how. Yeah.
Thank you. And then we've also been interested, we've been hearing a lot about hydrogen hubs, of course. No? It's always much bigger. You now mentioned port terminals, but can you give us an estimate of how expensive hydrogen hubs are going to be? Are there any numbers you can share with us just so we get a bit of a feeling for it?
No, this is too ambitious. No, there's so many different projects going on, and it's very difficult to focus. You know, where does a terminal start? Where does it end? And again, we're talking about different technologies. We talked about ammonia. I mentioned this project, this pilot project, Japan, Australia, which is focusing on a pure hydrogen transport. How this is very sexy, but it's very complicated, and to my understanding, the market is still settling, and I unfortunately I can't give any clear focus on that. I gave some figures with my presentation, but it's very different. It's very difficult to compare the projects so that you can say it's just one amount, a certain amount.
Yeah, thank you. I thought I would try because you're the expert, but thank you for already providing the numbers in your presentation. They're definitely helpful. And I think the really big number that we all have in our head is probably not even big enough to cover the total costs. But with this, Rolf, I will hand over to you for the next session. Thank you very much, Hartmut.
Welcome.
Thanks, Hartmut. Thanks, Sonia. So, next session. So we've discussed really hubs have to be organized. We've discussed also now, so what needs, where's the money going to come to pay for everything? But I would like to actually, we have a number of speakers now who actually have experience in really existing experience in how to transport the different types of hydrogen. So it's the theme of the session is the flow of molecules, not just electrons, but molecules. We have three different speakers, three different countries. Let me start off with Adina, with Yara. So those of you who know the fertilizer sector, Yara is perhaps the most famous and perhaps the most green-oriented of all the fertilizer companies. So I'm really honored really to have somebody from Yara speak at the panel. I'd love to hear more from you, and I'd like to do more business with you because Yara is like really leading the way on green fertilizer. But what most people don't know is that Yara has actually been one of the few people not only import ammonia, but actually they do a lot of the transport themselves. And so they're actually, they have a double business, both of producing, but also importing the fertilizer, the ammonia they need to produce the fertilizer. So I'm very happy to have Adina here with us, the director of decarbonization partner policy, which goes to show they have a whole division in the fertilizer business directed to decarbonization. She was amazingly national policy advisor to the leadership of the Labour Party in Norway. So she comes with a very politically objective and governance. And the personal thing is that if I were Harry Potter, I would now say Aloha Mora, and I would turn Adina into the decarbonizer. But with this, I will therefore make myself disappear, and then it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Rolf, for that really wonderful introduction. And thank you so much, all the other speakers that have already participated. I think I've written 3 pages of notes already. So thank you very much. If it's possible to show the presentation, that would be great. Now, I was just going to, we can just skip the 2 first. This is like a disclaimer and stuff, boring stuff. But I was going to start with, well, where are we when we're talking about ammonia? Because I refer to Yara as a accidental hydrogen producer and transporter and user, because we've been producing hydrogen for over 100 years, but we've never been interested in the hydrogen. We wanted the nitrogen that we are taking from the air and that the plants need to grow. So for us, hydrogen was just the best way to capture nitrogen. But now, as we are moving into the entire planet is having a green transition, we are seeing that the energy that the hydrogen is carrying is of great importance, not just for fertilizers, but for fueling the green transition. We are the world's largest ammonia distributor today, but this is just for ourselves. It's for producing fertilizer primarily. We are also selling to others, so transporting ammonia to other entities. If you see where we are located, you will see that there are 3 distinct areas. And until a couple of years ago, or actually until last year, we had a lot of intra-transport. So Southeast Asia, that whole market we would transport internally there. The same for Europe. We have many different sites, and we would transport ammonia from the ammonia producing sites to the ammonia using sites. And of course, Latin, Central, and North America was sort of one hub as well. After the use of energy as a weapon against especially Europe, we have also seen that the ammonia trade has gone from other parts of the world into Europe. We can go to the next one. Now, how does this look? What are we doing with the ammonia? Well, as I said, we are first producing hydrogen. Today, all hydrogen is produced by natural gas, and we try to clean some of it to capture a lot of the carbon, but we need to get better. We need blue hydrogen and we need green hydrogen that is produced from electricity without any fossil fuels or any fossil resources involved. And then we turn it into ammonia. Now, why do we do this? We love hydrogen, but we don't love handling hydrogen. So we turn it into ammonia as fast as we possibly can. We do not like to store hydrogen, so we turn it into ammonia, then we can store the ammonia in ammonia tankers, and that's relatively easy, and then we can ship it. Because you need large-scale factories in order to produce ammonia with any kind of, to meet the standards that we are setting for our production. So there's large-scale production, but you need a couple of things. You need easy access to resources. You need a lot of power. So where we can produce the ammonia and the hydrogen isn't necessarily where we can use it. So that's why we need something that's easy to transport. Now, hydrogen, you need to either pressurize it or refrigerate it down to minus 230 degrees to get it liquid. Now, that costs us a lot of energy, while as turning it into ammonia also costs more energy, but makes it way more efficient when we are transporting it. So that's why we chose the ammonia route. And when I'm saying, it sounds like I only want ammonia. This is not true. We need everything, everywhere, all at once. We need hydrogen. We need liquid hydrogen. We need biomethanol. We need a lot of new energy forms or new energy carriers in order to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. And after we've transported ammonia, then we go to the marketing and distribution to the end users, which can be, for now, it's mostly fertilizer companies. Next slide, please. Now, the most important partner when we are moving forward is actually the ports, because a very, very large part of the value chain for ammonia and hydrogen going forward will be found at the ports, both now, because it's one of the first things that will happen, but also in the future, because it is where a lot of the continuous use will take place. So we have 18 terminals for ammonia. We are now trying to teach what we have learned on how to handle ammonia in terminals and how to make it accessible to other users. So you can both have, for the ports, you can use the ammonia straight off as a shipping fuel. Then you have a shipping fuel that does not emit any carbon emissions, which is totally carbon free in use. and can be used for the ships straight off. But it can also be the starting point for hinterland connectivity, pipes into the rest of the country. Now, just to give you sort of a sense of the scale that we are talking about, we are trying to replace the fossil fuels that our world cannot continue to be reliant upon. I checked the numbers for how much infrastructure is really connected to sort of the fossil part. And if you just look at pipelines for oil and gas, it's 1.18 million kilometers. That's enough to circumvent the planet 30 times. When it comes to hydrogen or ammonia pipelines, I think we could maybe reach 0.00003 times around the world once. So we have a massive task ahead of us, but I'm quite sure I know we will achieve it. And this is another part, because a lot of people have been asking, what about the chicken, the hen and the egg, the chicken and the egg? I mean that I strongly believe that the ports are both the hen and the egg. Shipping is one of the hard to abate sectors, but where we know that they will need hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives for the long run. So we know that this will be the fuel of the future, but the ship owners, the ship builders need to have reassurance that the ammonia will be there for them when they build their ships. So I'm asking the ports to take a leap of faith, because we need to build the infrastructure and the ships will come. Next slide, please. This is just one thing, because another thing that we need to collaborate with the ports on is the safety. You could just take a couple of clicks, because when we are introducing a new fuel, we need to be very, very, very absorbed. We need to be almost like single-mindedly focused on safety. We have ammonia production and hydrogen production in big cities right now, so we know how to handle this safely, but we need to inform the public and everyone that will need to know how to handle it. How do you do this in a safe manner? We cannot afford any accidents. And there we need the ports. We are very lucky to have ports that are completely ruthless when it comes to safety, strict regulations. We need that. That's exactly what we need. Next slide, please. One such example is a collaboration that we have with. Oh, sorry, I'm too long now.
Can we give you a 60-second warning, please?
Yeah, perfect. So just a small example, Pilbara, we have already joined corporations with the Pilbara port to see how does an ammonia port look like. Not the ammonia terminals that we are currently operating, where we own everything, but a public ammonia port where ships can use the ammonia for fuel. So we will be happy to share all the findings that we find during this collaboration. And next and final slide, please. This is just a short summary of what we've been talking about. So we need ammonia, we need hydrogen, we need liquid hydrogen, we need biomethanol. It's room for everyone, but we need to do it right now because we don't have a lot of time. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm sorry that I was a bit too long.
Yeah, no, all good. Look, I think we listened in fascination. So as always, I'd love to hear more of people, and hearing that you have 18 ammonia terminals is amazing. I don't think anybody recognizes there's only like 120 ammonia terminals worldwide, and you have 18 of those. So it goes to show
them in
the
Germany.
impact. Yeah, I'm sure there are. Good, and thank you all for the message. We need everything. We need to decarbonize today. But we can't. I mean, Norway is a great lead, or sorry, Sweden. So Yara is Sweden or Norway? I forget. Norway.
Yara is Norway, but we have
Norway. Yes, Norway is great. But we need some. If we want to decarbonize everywhere all at once and at the same time, we need other countries. And with that, I would like to bring in the next speaker in. So this is now, we have Constantinos Frate from Brazil. And so he's managed to survive his technical issues. And Constantine now will give us quite a different perspective. He's on the good side, he's a mechanical engineer, so he knows all the physics around hydrogen, but he's really more now on the level of trying to create more collaborations and really to write different companies together. So he's not the port specialist, but more like connecting the different people within the port. And with this, é grande prazer. So let me pass on to Constantino, and then so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rolf. It's a pleasure for me to stay to be here. Okay, I will share my presentation. Just a second. Differently from Norway, here is sun all the year. Okay. I will try to talk in 7 minutes. And the first of all, our state, Ceará state, is the state where we host the Pecém port. That is a partnership with Rotterdam. Rotterdam already has 30% of Pecém's shareholder. Is a partnership of a state government of Ceará. Here is some issues related to our potential for renewable energy generation in Ceará. As you see here, we have, for example, in offshore wind, about 56 gigawatts under license process here in the state. Of course, we don't have a demand, internal demand for all this energy, okay? But it is only to give you a view of our potential. Of course, we expect to have the lower cost of green hydrogen here in Ceará state. We have a lot of studies from McKinsey, Bloomberg, etc., that point out that Ceará will have in Brazil the best price of the green hydrogen. Here is the Pecém Port Complex. That is a partnership between the state government and Rotterdam Port. We have here an industrial area bigger than 19,000 hectares, including a free trade zone with more than 6,000 hectares. Here is a view of our port. Is a port in open water. Is a modern and young port here with taxes, low taxes. Here we have the view of the port facilities, including 2 piers, one dedicated nowadays to natural gas, and one other multi-purpose terminal. They are connected by 2 bridges. And here we have the solutions that we are adopted for the infrastructure solutions for the green hydrogen hub in Pecém. The port infrastructure, we plan to operate ammonia and, of course, all green hydrogen derivative in the Pier 2. We are planning to have an ammonia storage shared tanking here, of course, to have less investment costs and operation costs, of course. A corridor of utilities. Nowadays, we have now separated 1,100 hectares only for electrolysis plants in the free trade zone of Pecém Port. And we now have, of course, we have to strengthen the grid, the transmission line, but we have about 1.5 to 3 gigawatts power generation connection in the grid available now, okay, to start the green hydrogen production here at Pecém Port. In terms of potential off-takers, of course, we are having at this time an study with the ramp-up program of GIZ. But the Port Pecém and Port of Rotterdam is considered the closest green hydrogen export-import route between South America and Europe. Of course, we are estimating about 1.3 million tons of green hydrogen per year in 2030, in 2030. And we think that we could potentially meet 25% of all the Rotterdam's import demand. Here is some clusters that we have now at Pecém Port, the energy cluster with 2 coal-fired power plants of EGP and Eneva, and 2 gas-fired power plants. These 2 coal-fired power plants, they are planning to substitute the coal for the green hydrogen in the next year. It's a decision by the board of these companies, okay? We have 2 wind blades factory here at Pecém, a steel mill that nowadays the biggest one, the bigger one is the ArcelorMittal that is planning to have green steel production here at Pecém Port, 2 cement factories, animal nutrition, logistics, etc. We have now 3 companies, Casa dos Ventos, Fortescue, and AES Brazil, with a pre-contract signed with Pecém Port. They are now paying for the area, for a reservation of the area that will be used for the green hydrogen plants. And at the right side, we have 26 MOUs dedicated to green hydrogen production. If you can note here, we have, for example, Goodwind, Care, Lind, Fortescue, Speak, that is a Chinese company, EDP from Portugal, Total Eren, etc. ABB, Stolthaven, Mitsui, HDF, Transhydrogen Alliance, only to mention some European companies, okay? Here is the Ceará State project. Of course, we are trying to mitigate all the risk for the private investors in the green hydrogen chain. And of course, accelerated transition from the pilot project to industrial scale. We have now a project pilot being in operation. This pilot was built by EGP, Energy from Portugal. Is a pilot of 1.25 megawatts supplied by 3 megawatts of photovoltaic generation plant. And we have here all the investments planned to support the infrastructure necessary for the effective implementation of the green hydrogen chain in Pecém. Talking about the steps, we are planning the expansion of the QHEN multi-utility terminal to allow the implementation of a docking berth to handle large project cargoes and inputs for the green hydrogen production chain. And the Pier 2 expansion is only for ammonia and all the derivatives of green hydrogen to allow the export for example, to Europe, okay? When we have implementation of utility corridor infrastructure and ammonia storage shared area, we have now selecting all the companies that will be constructed, building this infrastructure for ammonia storage here at Pecém Port. All these investments for infrastructure, they are already included in Pecém Port business plan. So the operation aims to finance the needs of the future operators, okay? Investments, for example, in wastewater treatment, desalination, demineralization project are already planned. Okay.
Sorry, can I give you the 60-second bell?
Okay, it's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Here is our projection, okay? This projection is based on a conservative scenario and in the growth of the green hydrogen production based on investors that are already paying for the reservation of the area in the free trade zone of Passport. Our projection is just this, about 8.1 gigawatts of electrolysis and about the double of renewable sources of renewable energy, okay? So that's all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, thanks. Muito obrigado, Constantino. Really, thank you a lot. I mean, this is impressive to see how much you're really doing per se. And I would be jealous. I think many others would be jealous to see already how many companies have signed MOUs and to see you have Fortescue there and the company from Portugal and others. So really, congratulations. We have questions, but let me take one more speaker just to stick to the molecules issue. We've talked about Hamburg and we've talked about Bremen, but I would like now to introduce a third German port because I think this German port deserves the prize for speed. I'm talking about the port of Wilhelmshaven, who in record time created LNG terminals. And I think both Sonia and I would like to hear from them. How do you actually, even in this complicated Germany with all the permits process, how do you are able to build a hub so quickly, so rapidly? And that would be a nice light tower example for everybody else. And I'm calling upon Dr. Thelen, I'm told, who's the head of the public affairs department of Onyx Power, who's jumping in at short notice for us. So we greatly appreciate that you're here with us today. And if you're joining us today in your capacity as the communications lead of the energy hub of Wilhelmshaven. So you already got the prize for being the speediest, so over to you.
Thanks a lot for inviting us to present what we are doing in Wilhelmshaven. With respect to the title of the presentation, it's more than LNG, yes, indeed, and you were referring to what is used to be called Deutschlandgeschwindigkeit. I would be a bit more careful in that respect, as there was already existing plans for a project for the import of LNG since 1973, so they could rely on some work that had been done before. But nevertheless, so hydrogen was already on the agenda before the LNG terminal was. Yeah, here we go, and then probably we go to the next slide already. Well, thanks. Hydrogen, we started to discuss hydrogen in Wilhelmshaven already 3 years ago. I have to say it was a purely private initiative of private companies. You see them here on the slide. They came together against the background that one or the other had a nice project for producing hydrogen or importing hydrogen. And they applied for in the IPCEI process, but they failed. So there was a big discussion what was wrong, what went wrong, and they came up to the conclusion that they had very nice descriptions of their very project, but they didn't care about the value chain. So the idea was born to have a kind of common approach, to join forces, to develop or to look at the potential of Wilhelmshaven as an import spot for hydrogen and as a production spot for indigenous production of hydrogen, to look at the potential to integrate that into the planned hydrogen backbone, and to identify synergy potential between the different projects, so heat that can be used, oxygen that can be used, and so on and so forth. And not least, also creating an opportunity to find potential for cooperation between the different players, as we are all working in non-mature markets, so that may help to speed up the process. So that is where we came from. We did an initial study together with Deutsche Energieagentur. They came up with a kind of strategy paper for the region. And when it comes now to the import, probably we go to the next slide, please. So we already talked about the import and the challenges with respect to import. We are now all waiting for the achievements of Kawasaki Heavy Industries to have a liquefied hydrogen carrier. But as long as this doesn't exist, we have to live with other carriers, with other hydrogen carriers. And so we are now working on the value chain to convert the imported hydrogen or the ammonium or the synthetic methane or the liquefied organic hydrogen carrier into hydrogen and the rest. And then we are keen to get industry, energy intensive industry to Wilhelmshaven. So we have sufficient space. We have storage potential in the proximity of Wilhelmshaven, salt caverns, and we have the connection to the hydrogen backbone. So that is basically where we come from, and these are the ingredients for the strategy paper that I mentioned earlier. When we go to the next slide, looking at what we call here unique selling points, I think what makes Wilhelmshaven specific in Germany is that Wilhelmshaven is Germany's only deep water port. That means a draft of 18 meters and good nautical access. This allows to handle QMax ships for LNG or the ships of the Panamax class. We have an excellent location for electrolyzers as we are directly at the coast, and the incoming offshore wind will be connected via Wilhelmshaven, or to a large extent will be connected via Wilhelmshaven, and we have connections to the transmission grid. We have the starting point of the gas infrastructure of the hydrogen backbone, all what is now being built to transport LNG can be converted to hydrogen. And as I said before, we have salt caverns. We have the biggest salt cavern location in the proximity of Wilhelmshaven, directly in the region. And that will allow us to cover more or less, or the potential of Wilhelmshaven is to cover more or less 50% of the expected hydrogen demand in 2030. And that includes location of indigenous production and imports. So this is what makes Wilhelmshaven very special in Germany. And when we go to the next slide, here we see the further development of the private initiative. As I said, it was a loose cooperation of private companies, and we decided to create a kind of organizational setting for that. And new members came in. You see now the big players already on board, even companies like RWE, BP, or ENGIE, they are joining, and and we also integrated as associate members scientific and the scientific world, consultancies, the Agency for Labor, and so on and so forth. And we also integrated the local administration. So that is what I want to say is that we already took the approach to integrate the stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders, so that they are informed directly what we are doing and what the way ahead is. To the next slide, please. Yeah, that is now the organizational setting that we choose. So we have a speaker of the Energy Hub. Unfortunately, he couldn't show up today. So as he was subject to a flu, and we have several working groups. We are coping with the whole value chain. That is one working group. We have the energy infrastructure, that is electricity and hydrogen infrastructure. We have the port infrastructure, that is a very special issue. We already talked about the issue of fire brigade and so on and so forth. And we have a working group that is coping with permits, with facilitating the settlement of industrial players. And finally, we have the communication and the regulatory affairs role that in a way, consolidates all the views of the different work streams. So this is the setting that we choose. And we have currently, when we go to the next slide, we have been updating the DENA study. So this slide shows that we had workshops on different issues, the H2 value chain, the energy infrastructure and port infrastructure. And we have now an updated overview of the existing and possible energy corridors for methane, for H2, for water, for CO2, and for electricity. So the next slide gives you a flavor of what we are doing or what is ongoing in the region. We have 25 project locations. So it's they are clustered in the north and in the south of Wilhelmshaven, of the city of Wilhelmshaven. But we also have projects in the proximity of Wilhelmshaven. We have various projects that, we are covering the whole value chain, from the import of ammonia, including crackers, to electrolyzers, to storage in salt caverns, and to the industrial settlement of off-takers. So everything is included. And we expect, or we see the potential for Wilhelmshaven to provide roughly 35 terawatt hours in 31. So, and that is covering more, could cover 37 to 61% of the expected demand at that time. So that is, I think, everything I wanted to tell you. So thanks a lot.
No, thank you. I mean, this is, for me, fascinating to see like 2 points. You've again highlighted the issue of transport, distribution, and storage. Really highlighted the advantages of really of storage and connecting. The second point, which I liked, was actually your structure, where you had your 4 working groups on the issue value chain. There was the port infrastructure. The one was then regulations, which was amazing.
Yep.
Make sure you have somebody to deal with. And I forgot the fourth one. The fourth one was on
The harbor infrastructure.
harbor infrastructure. So I mean, port, harbor.
At the settlement. So how do we get, the question is how can we facilitate the settlement of industrial energy intensive industry?
Energy intense, yes, no, really good. So thinking even the carpet is well done. So Dr. Tian, thank you again. Thank you also for coming at short notice. We are going to skip some questions and integrate them with the panel, and therefore let me hand over to Sonia for that purpose.
Yeah, thank you, Rolf. Exactly. Let's move on to our panel discussion, which will finally give us the opportunity for discussions among our speakers, but also address more questions from the audience. So dear participants, feel free to participate via the chat function. We will then feed in your questions. We have all our distinguished speakers from earlier now on the panel. Let me quickly check whether Mr. Nito from Uruguay is back in the call. We had some technical problems with him, unfortunately. Mr. Nito, can you hear us? It doesn't seem to be the case, unfortunately. But yeah, let's bring together both perspectives, export and import, and let's explore potential barriers and solutions, next steps for the development of a worldwide green hydrogen market. Rolf, do you already have a question from the audience
Yeah.
that you want to start?
Yes, we've been reading the audience, just for the audience to know, there are many things that are just so specific. So we're trying to filter out those that relate to ports and where we can connect the panelists. So I have a double question. The first one, Lars, this was for you. Many people were curious, why is Bremerhaven not going into ammonia? And therefore, then the reverse question then to Edina, why is therefore also Yara so keen about ammonia? Be interesting to hear, let's say, very different perspectives.
Well, very simple, for safety reasons. So we would have been, would have required great lengths to comply with all the safety requirements. And we decided that we most probably will rule out ammonia.
Okay. Adina, is that hard to comply with safety? It could be you're just experienced.
Yeah, no, it's true that there are very strict safety regulations regarding both ammonia and of course hydrogen and any other fuels. For most fuels, the problem is that they are explosive or highly combustible. For ammonia, it's actually the problem is that it is toxic. So it needs to be handled with care as well as any other fuel. But for us, it might be just that we've done it for so long that it's been it's part of our culture to handle ammonia in a safe way. So we don't fear ammonia, but we respect it. And we have operations in my hometown, Porsgrunn, in the southern part of Norway. The plant is right smack in the middle of the city. So this is something that we are operating on a daily basis, and the same with the ships. I think we are operating 12 ships, but we are borrowing a few more, renting a few more. So I think there's 15 ships on the seas right now transporting ammonia from A to B, and we are transporting over 4 million tons every year. So but I can understand especially if it's a new thing, because I think one thing is you need to build the structure to minimize any risks, but the last part is the people handling, and you need a safety culture that is that does not you cannot take any shortcuts. You cannot not take safety seriously. So I think I'll invite Lars to come and visit us in one of our terminals, and you can you'll be a bit less afraid afterwards.
No, I mean it's a fair decision because it's like the things, and I think it's a fair discussion because it gives everybody therefore a sense of everybody's going cool on ammonia wants to export, and we saw then also from the financing section that we have so many export ammonia terminals, but you need to treat it with care. I think that's the key takeaway. Sonia, do you have a question?
Yeah, there was a question to Linda. I think Hartmut and Edina already spoke a bit about the hen and egg or chicken and egg problem between port infrastructure and shipping infrastructure. How do you approach this topic at HPA?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Many times coming up. So in my point of view, actually, we don't have a concrete chicken and egg problem. So if we look, like if ships have come into operation with a new fuel, they already ensure they have contractors, they have contracts with fuel suppliers, so they ensure that they have fuel available in the ports where they sail. So my point of view, this chicken and egg problem is not a problem which should, which is not really existing. So we always, we are in contact with shipping companies, and we try to provide infrastructure beforehand. And when we know ships come into force with a new fuel, the shipping companies also get into contact with the ports, with fuel suppliers, so that the value chain is involved and that the infrastructure is in place when the ships are in place.
Thank you, Linda. I see Hartmut had something to add there.
Yeah, just something which came into my mind. Sorry to step in, but I think shipping companies, they are service provider. They do what the market wants. Ports, again, are service provider. They do what the market wants. So we have to look to the industry, to the ones who decide what kind of product they need for their production. And of course, and that was something I tried to explain, there should be a kind of a focus. What kind of derivative are we talking about? What kind of hydrogen we're talking about? And if this is clarified or will be clarified during the next years, then there should be also a clear perspective on the kind of terminal technology which is then required.
Exactly. So we see that for example, at the moment, the shipping companies are going into direction of methanol. We see the first seagoing vessels, container vessels, so different ship types coming into operation of methanol. So the major ports around the world, they are preparing methanol infrastructure. So there will be no infrastructure or bunkering infrastructure problem for bunkering for methanol in the major ports.
Thank you. Then, Rolf, do we have another question from the audience?
So my question is, so the basis to everybody, those especially who are running ports, it is, let me start off with Constantino. I think everybody was impressed of the number of MOUs and investors you have coming in to Peseng. And so what are the key things that investors are looking for, and that, or what are the key things that you offer to them that makes them come to you?
Okay, thank you, Rolf. I think that first of all, the state of Ceará has excellent indicators of renewable energy in terms of capacity factor, in terms of infrastructure, even the port infrastructure, in terms of distribution lines, transmission lines, substations. The port is modern and, like I mentioned before, has low taxes. And this is not only the main reason for attracting so much attention worldwide, okay? But I think that the state of Ceará is very well organized, and the state is doing internal work for more than 3 decades that are organized the state. The fiscal health of the state is very good. Of course, our state is not a rich state, but we have enough funds to finance the infrastructure projects. In the second hand, in my point of view, we have here a strategic group created involving all the stakeholders of the states of Ceará, like, for example, the academy, the federation of industry, the state government, etc., all the society, okay, that provides all the policies, all the studies needed, involved even GIZ, World Bank, McKinsey, Fraunhofer Institute, etc., that provides to Ceará State a roadmap, not only for the configuration of the hub, but for the public policies. So I think that the main reason are those, okay?
Good. Okay. Now, things that sounds like really good, really infrastructure, financing, reliability. Let me pass on to Dr. Thelen, to Carl Peter. You raise your hand.
I think that is a valid point, but we are discussing the different pieces of the value chain, and I think the big challenge will be that we have to have an integrated view on the production, from the production to the off-taker, to organize that chain. And I think we have to build that view and to develop that on the same speed. So nobody will import any molecule of hydrogen or ammonia or so on and so forth when there is no off-taker, and that requires an infrastructure to transport to the off-taker. And I think we have to look to take an integrated view on that. So it's good that we have the specific view on each element of the value chain, but at the end we have to come to a complete view of the value chain.
Yeah, I think most would agree with you. Without off-taker, no bank is going to finance anything. Constantino, you raise your hand again.
Only to, one additional information, Brazil has nowadays one of the biggest agribusiness in the world. And for example, one more attraction is the fertilizer supply, okay? Because nowadays we import about 80% of all the needs of fertilizers, including ammonia, urea, etc., of the country, okay? So we have here a strong internal market, not only for ammonia, but even for e-fuels, synthetic fuels, that are being developed by some of these companies that I have shown before, okay?
So yes, thanks. That brings us back to the fuel discussion. And do we go for, I see that now, of course, well, what else would Adina say? Of course, brings us back to ammonia. You're muted. Unmute, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was more the whole picture that Dr. Teren was talking about, because it's very true that when you, for me, my goal is trying to turn our planet into something that can be sustainable forever and ever, and that means that I want to use renewable power for as much as I can. If you can plug it in, you should plug it in. And then sometimes that's not enough. You need the extra punch that you get from hydrogen. So if you can get by on only hydrogen, do that. Please do that. I don't want a drop of ammonia to be used where hydrogen would have been sufficient, because you will lose energy in the conversion. But after you've used hydrogen for everything you can, you will still have those really hard to abate sectors. For instance, shipping. For instance, some sort of coal fuel power that we will also need to get rid of pretty soon. But in the meantime, we can use ammonia to reduce the emissions. And you will need to use it continuously for fertilizer. Our problem now is that every molecule that is produced, if it's hydrogen or if it's turned into ammonia, it's used. So we need massive new production. And I'm worried about, are we impatient enough, and are we doing this quickly enough? Because I am sure that the demand will come from, especially from Germany, which was really spearheading the green hydrogen transition. But we need the production to come after, or to come before. So myself and other suppliers, we need to ramp it up.
Yes, so thank you, Adina. I think I'd agree. Let me pass the floor to Nohila, who's been hadn't had a chance. So I know already in your presentation you were extremely impatient and want to give us all the information. So what do you feel about the what is Morocco doing in terms of fuels? Have you taken a bet, or are you trying to be open for all sides? And how are you preparing all of your ports to be able to, the 6 different hubs that you've envisaged?
Thank you, Rolf, for the word. Yes, so here in Morocco now, we are preparing now the hydrogen Moroccan offer. We have some small groups that are working on dedicated topics. Infrastructure is one of the thematics that are working on, and ports is also taking priority. So we have existing ports, but they are dedicated mainly for fishing and small usage for cruising. And we have 3 big ports that are dedicated to trade, international trade. One in the north, it's in the Mediterranean Sea, Tangemed, and the other on Casablanca from the west, and another which is located in Jorfsford. We are importing mainly chemical products there, namely ammonia for the fertilizer industry, which is located in this region. Now the plan for ports are mainly dedicated to building new ports in the south region, because there we have a very big potential in terms of renewables. We have a high load factor for wind and solar both. So it will be relevant to host those power to X large scale project there, and also that will be dedicated to export, also for importing goods here in Morocco. So and there are also some extensions in of other ports in the pipes.
So very happy to hear of really all the efforts really to accelerate development.
Thank you.
So let me pass on to my co-moderator, Sonia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rolf. Thank you very much, everyone. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of today's webinar. I wish we could keep the discussion going for many more hours, but I think we can all agree this has been a very timely event and we've learned a lot today. And if I may summarize, especially what I've heard now during the last discussion, it's moving at speed is what we need. I want to thank all the participants online and our dear panelists in today's event very, very much for taking the time to share your knowledge, your insights, and also your next steps with us. And I also want to give special thanks again to Dr. Storost and BMWK. Again, the event has been recorded and we will now close today's session.
So Sonia, 3, 1, 2, 3 from our side. Thank you. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you all for joining.